This is an interview with Art Jeffrey, Colonel Art Jeffrey of the United States Army Air Force. Hello, Art.
Hi, John.
I think I said to you in my emails to you that my dad was a night fighter pilot in the Royal Air Force, but I don't think he was in your neck of the woods because he was mainly in North Africa and Palestine and Italy.
No, I flew out of Ipswich.
Yeah.
I mean, near Ipswich. And,
Okay.
Was the Watersham Air Force Base.
Okay. Because there are a lot of Air Force bases on that flat land in
right.
East Anglia. It must have been very cold in winter.
It was.
I was looking at some photographs of this B-17 pilot that I know quite well, and they were in Bedfordshire, which is not far from where you were, and there were photographs of their Nissen huts taken in winter, and everything was covered in snow.
One it almost landed on our base. It came in, and
You told me you were out riding a bike.
yeah, I was out with a friend of mine. We were out riding bicycles, and we got word that this B-17 was coming in an emergency landing, and it did not quite make the field, and it made the belly landing short of the runway, and the crew members kept running out and said, it started to burn, and they said the bombs are still on board. Well, I'll tell you, we broke bicycle speed records getting away from there, and we got almost a mile away, and junk fell down when those bombs went off. We had stuff falling around us.
Wow. Yeah. It must have
We
been.
didn't get hit, fortunately, but
Well,
it scared the hell out of us.
now, Kent, I was just going to say that I'm really pleased to be speaking to your dad because he's one of the most accomplished fighter pilots on our side. And I've been very lucky to speak to some extraordinary people. I'm speaking to one now. So let me kind of start at the beginning then. Were you born in 1919?
Yes.
Okay. And where were you born?
I was born in Mountain View, Arkansas.
In the country rather than in a city or a town.
That's right. Definitely in the country, in the Ozark Mountains.
You're in pretty good shape. You're very sentient for somebody who was born in 1919, which is a very good thing. And I had this little theory because I've spoken to so many guys of your age now as a result of doing this book. Most of them are really switched on. Their brains are really, really switched on. And I think it's because you were kind of screened. You were pre-selected when you were young men, because you were fit, you were intelligent, you were, you had the right mental attitude.
Hey, John, this was on my dad's desk. I just want to show you this picture. This was after the war. This is my dad on one side, not the best picture,
yeah.
but can you recognize who's on the other side?
Yeah, it's Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Right.
And
Cool picture, huh?
It's a fantastic picture.
Yeah, we had 1 year, we invited the former German aces to our aces reunion in Mesa, Arizona, and Galland and Kupinski, and then they invited us back.
Do you remember if a guy called Gunter Rahl was at your thing?
He was. I remember.
Yeah, because he's one of my pilots. And
Is that right?
and I really enjoyed meeting him too. I went to his house in Germany, which is it was like a small castle. He's passed away now, unfortunately. But I really felt that when I met him, I really felt that he was a truly extraordinary man. So Gunter
My dad thought that was his fault.
I thought that was my dog barking.
Gunter was somebody who had such charisma. I felt that he was a man who, if I was a young officer serving under him, I would do anything that he asked me to do, no questions asked. I'd fly into the jaws of hell for him. He had that kind of effect on people, I thought. But then I also thought that he was a man, I think he was essentially a very good man, that he knew that he had that power over people, but he didn't take advantage of it. He didn't abuse that power. And his main job, particularly towards the end of the war, from what I can figure out, was to protect his men, because he felt that this whole thing was a waste of time, and they were they were on the wrong side. They felt that fighting the Russians was the right thing to do, but Gunther felt very strongly that fighting against the British and the Americans was just insane.
It turned out he was very right.
But anyway, he was a really, really nice guy. I really liked him, and I was very sad to hear that he passed away. How old were you when you joined the Air Force?
19.
19. So you would have been, that was before the war.
Yeah. That was before England was in the war even.
Yeah.
I went in August of 1939.
So your motivation for joining up was because you enjoyed flying?
I was tired of working in the mines. And I really did as a boy. The paperback books I read were about World War I fighter aces, I did really aspire as a teenager to become a pilot in the Air Force.
And do you remember the moment that you heard about the invasion or the attack on Pearl Harbor?
Yes, I had just actually I hadn't soloed too much before Pearl Harbor at primary flying school, because I didn't get in flying school right away when I enlisted in the old Army Air Corps, and I didn't have the 2 years college, so I had to pass a 3-day examination to even get in as what they called then an aviation cadet. But I was in primary flying school, and I had just come down from a solo flight, and my instructor met me and said, "The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor." He says, "Yeah, we'll probably go to war now."
And when you were soloing there, were you flying a Harvard?
A PT-19, built by Fairchild.
Okay.
And the Harvard came, there were 3 primary flying school, and then you went on, if you passed that, you went to basic flying school and flew BT, I think 14s, and then if you passed the basic flying school, then you went on to advanced flying school, where we flew what you call a Harvard.
Okay. And did you show aptitude as being an advanced, an above-average pilot from early on?
Yes, I did, because I was kind of on the defense. You see, I had to pass this 3-day examination to get an appointment as a cadet, and where at that time a big lot of the my classmates came from the northeast and east, like Yale graduates, Harvard graduates, and all with outstanding college degrees. And you talk about a class system, it existed in my class of 42D. And so and when we'd be on the athletic field, when we'd be playing touch football or other sports, I was 6'2", weighed a little over 200 pounds, and in exceptional good shape. And so I was rougher than hell on those my classmates, because they looked down their nose at me, and a few people in my class liked me, and I was sort of the leader of the rebels. So in basic flying school, our athletic director had a picture for the class book of the 2 he considered the most outstanding athletes in the class, and it was me and one of the guys from the Northeast who came from a very rich family, and I've forgotten what school he went to, but he and I actually became close friends. But anyhow, I was sort of on the defense, and then after we graduated from flying school and immediately signed the P-38s. And that was a big step to go from the Harvard to the P-38.
I see you have a P-38 on the wall behind you.
Oh,
That's a lithograph, yeah. That was one that me and Robin Olds and Hub Zimke and Jack Ilfrey signed.
Okay.
Uh,
And what did you think of
have you
the?
heard Hub Zimke and Robin Olds? Yeah.
What did you think of the P-38 as an aircraft to fly?
I'll tell you, it depended on the mission. It was great for ground support, but the P-51 was better at high altitude aerial combat, but the P-38 was for ground support was superior, and the P-51 was superior at altitude. And
So, how many victories did you get in a P-38?
I only got 4. And most of my tour was in the P-38, but most of our missions were ground support work when we had the P-38s. So we did not get very much escort work for the bombers, you know, and that's where the action was as far as aerial combat.
Yeah.
And so when we got to P-51s, we got Hub Zimke as group commander at the same time, and we started getting good missions. So even though I flew 4 fewer missions in the P-51, I got 10 kills in the P-51.
Yeah. So, did you train in the P-38 in the US?
I'll tell you, I was lucky enough to spend about 2 years in the States in instructing in the P-38. I instructed combat tactics, aerial gunnery, ground gunnery, and so I had quite a bit of time in the P-38 when we went overseas. And so I was lucky enough to get the first aerial victory and when our group got there, which was an FW-200.
Condor.
Yeah.
And do you think that you were an aggressive young man, or was that a part of your success as a pilot, or were you? Because you seem to me to be a fairly gentle sort of person.
When you get to be 92, you gentle down a lot.
He's definitely mellowed, I can tell you that. But he started out kind of wild and crazy and aggressive, I think.
Because we became operational, I think, on the 11th of May. We flew as a group. We flew our first mission on the 11th, I think it was, of May.
1944.
I may be wrong there.
So that's a month before D-Day.
Yes.
14 victories is a very high score. You know, I've spoken to so many guys who flew Mustangs and Spitfires and Hurricanes and so on, who didn't score anything.
You know what? The people that did primarily ground support were really the unsung heroes, because that's where you have your high casualty rate, is on ground support work. And some of the outfits, that's what they did mostly, and what they accomplished was not quantifiable, and so they didn't get the glory that, say, people like us that flew, that got to have aerial combat, you know, on quite a few missions, and be able to score a few victories.
Yeah.
So,
do you know a guy who lives not far from you? He was a Thunderbolt pilot, P-47 and he was also flying out of England, mainly doing ground attack work. And his name is Jim Ashford. Very nice guy. And he did 99 ground attack missions. And the only
lucky to be alive.
Yeah, he said that 33% of the guys that the attrition rate was 33%. But the only damage that he really sustained was one day when he flew into a telegraph pole. So he must have been pretty low, and he thought for a moment that his wing was going to come off, but actually the telegraph pole broke instead. But when he got back to base, he was given hell by his crew, ground crew, because there was a big hole in his wing. Oh, and apparently you could see it on the cine camera. On the camera, he was actually firing at a the Germans had those anti-aircraft nests, and he was trying to get one of those. So his cameras were on, and they filmed him. The film caught him flying into the telegraph pole. But,
oh, well, that would be damning evidence, wouldn't it?
yeah, it's a
Like to be alive.
Yes, he did.
That's a shame that you lost your gun camera film, because that would be fantastic to see. Do you remember any of the? You have a reputation for being the first man to shoot down a jet. Do you recall that
Well,
piece of?
Really, it was not a jet, it was a rocket-propelled, not a true jet. The 262 was the first German jet that flew operationally, but the 163, the Me-163, which I got, came out before the 262 did.
The Komet was flight tested by this German woman test pilot called Hannah Reich, and they lost quite a few test pilots before those aircraft became operational. And she was the only one who was able to actually. She was the first pilot to successfully, repeatedly take the thing off and land it again. And it was an incredibly dangerous craft because, if things went wrong, there was so much energy behind the thing that it was invariably a disaster. But funnily enough, the B-17 pilot I mentioned earlier on, the one who lives in Portland, he once had one of those things fly past the front of his aircraft, but he reckons that there had been so many B-17s firing at the thing that by the time it got to him, the guy in the cockpit was well dead. Poor devil. But so, do you remember that contact? Can you tell me anything about that particular experience?
With the 163?
Yeah.
Well, on that particular mission, the bombers, we were escorting bombers that day, and the bombers got the hell shot out of them. And so our whole group split up in elements of two and to escort single crippled B-17s back. And me and my wingman, we picked this one B-17 that was shot up very, very badly. I think he had about 1.5 engines going. Part of the tail was shot off, and the airplane was just, I don't know what kept it going. And it was losing altitude and was heading in a northwesterly direction that would take them only into the North Sea, and they would completely miss England. And I could not figure out why he was on such a heading. And so I went around to the right side and would do this to try to get him to go that way because I couldn't get him on the communication, the channel that you're supposed to, the emergency channel. They weren't responding. And so I finally pulled up alongside and was doing this to the co-pilot. I wanted to talk to him. I wanted to head him in a westerly direction rather than an extreme northwest direction. And I was doing that, and I looked out and I saw this damn 163 coming up from the rear. So I immediately, before he could get into a shooting position, but I was practically in a stalled position because the B-17 was practically flying at a stalled airspeed. And so I was just wobbling along, And so it took me, when I turned that 163 took off, and I got down and I got a few good shots at him before he got out of range. And then I kept following, and I had to go from automatic lean to automatic rich, and finally get full thrust, full power. And of course, by that time he was out of range. but I kept following well below him because I wanted to have maximum airspeed. So he got where I guess he figured he was far enough ahead and high enough that he could turn and make a pass at me. Well, he didn't count on me having as much airspeed as I did. So when he was about in the 90-degree turn, I pulled right up and got some good deflection shots. And that's when I think I hit the pilot, because instead of diving down, he just seemed to fall down and go straight down into an almost vertical dive, and I tried to follow, but the damn P-38, you know, the prop-driven plane, if you dive it fast enough, you're not getting thrust from your props, you get braking action. And I hit the braking action speed, and that thing bucked like a bronco. But the 163 went, I would say, at about 75, 80 degree angle dive straight into a low cloud layer. And they say that can turn on a dime. At that speed, I don't think it's possible for him to come out. So that's why I think my deflection shot, I was lucky enough to hit the pilot. Didn't damage the airplane enough for it to blow up, which you always like to see, you know. But like I say, if he was going to dive to get away from me, he would have dived. He wouldn't have just fallen gradually off into.
Tell them your altitude when you pulled out.
Well, I don't really know. I'm guessing that I pulled out around 1,000 feet. But maybe a little higher than that, because that cloud layer, I think, was maybe. I don't really know. Hell, I wasn't looking at it.
Oh, I thought you went through the cloud layer and pulled out close to the ground.
Well, I did, but I pulled out at an angle about like this, Ken. And so I came back. I was going to, of course, in the meantime, my wingman had gotten way behind me, but he was yakking all the time, calling a play-by-play description of what was going on. So when I got back and landed, I was told by my commanding officer, Colonel Riddle, that don't talk to anybody until General Lawton gets down here. General Lawton came down, he wanted to, because this, incidentally, go back further, that morning they got us up a half an hour early for a briefing, saying the Germans had this rocket-propelled fighter plane which they would be putting into operation very, very soon. Well, hell, nobody expected soon to be that same day, but it was. So when General Lawton came down, I briefed him on what happened. He turned to Kyle Riddle and said, "Kyle, we got our first jetty." I'll never forget him saying that. So I was just going to claim a probable, but I was practically told by my commanding general and my commanding group commander that it to claim it destroyed. So I feel confident that he didn't recover, but I'm not absolutely sure. But they gave me credit for it destroyed anyhow.
Was part of that based on the wingman's call-by-call description of it?
That and the combat film and my account, and of course.
Do you know what became of the B-17?
Yes, that's an interesting story. And I'm glad you brought that up. they kept going in their northwesterly heading and finally had to ditch in the North Sea. And when you talk to Jeff Grossi, you might ask him, I think that they all got out except one crew member who was shot up badly enough he couldn't get out on his own, and they didn't have time to help him out. And he went down crying with this to a watery grave with the ship. The rest of them got into a dinghy or a lifeboat, and they were bobbing about in the North Sea for 4 days, and finally washed up shore and were taken prisoner. Now, I talked to the navigator, came to one of our squadron reunions once and gave us a briefing on what all happened and everything. And I asked him, I said, you were a navigator. Why didn't you navigate? Why did you let him fly on that head? He said, I did not know what heading he was on. All of my equipment was blown out. They had holes. I don't see how that, I don't know how they kept that airborne to make a belly landing in the channel, in the North Sea. But they all got out except that one guy. But if I had just waited a few seconds longer, at 163 with that cannon that blasted, it would have finished them off very, very easily. So at least it saved all except one crew member.
You scored 4 victories in your P38, and then you scored 10 in a P51. And do you have any other strong memories of of those when you were flying the P51? What was the victory that you remember most?
Probably the day I got 3 190s. We ran into actually a whole group. We ran into a gaggle of as they called them, of 190s and 109s. They were all together, and I was fortunate enough to get 3 of the 190s.
I was just going to say there were 2 missions where you got three enemy aircraft. Right, Dad?
One other time I got 3 109s.
Wow, that's quite extraordinary. So did you engage each of these aircraft individually in a dogfight, or were they kind of? I mean, I had this Spitfire pilot, this Royal Air Force guy called Lance Burrow Robinson. He said that he one day shot down 3 190s. He said he came up behind the first one, he shot it down, the second one straight away behind it, or just in front of it, and the third one a few seconds after that. It all happened in a few seconds. He flew up behind these 3 aircraft which were flying together, and he nailed the whole lot in one go. I'm sure it was much more difficult than that and much more dangerous than that, but so my question is, was it like that, or did you have to engage each of these guys individually?
Well, no, actually, I was very lucky. I was lucky in the first place that I was able to come up behind an element of two 190s, and I called my wingman and I said, look, I'm going to get the wingman, keep your eye on our 6 o'clock, and he said, okay. And so I got very easy, and then his element leader apparently didn't see because he was turning, but he wasn't taking evasive action, and until after I started shooting at him, and I used up a hell of a lot of ammunition on him, get him, and then after he went down, I saw a single, so I went after him, and I was able to get in position fairly quick, to get in before he could take too much evasive action. So it wasn't really all that difficult.
Okay.
Although I did use up all my ammunition.
Yeah.
And on the way home, I ran into a 109 that was feeling feisty and tried to turn into me. And that mission was in pretty deep in Germany. And the last thing I wanted to do was, without ammunition, get into a dogfight with a 109 or anything, you know, and use up my fuel, and not be able to get home. And so fortunately, I didn't get on his tail. I didn't let him get on my tail, so he finally just ducked down into the clouds, and I said a prayer of relief and headed for home, and just barely got home with no ammunition and very little fuel.
You obviously stayed in the Air Force for some time after the war. You became a full colonel.
Yeah.
And you didn't take part in Korea.
In Korea, they sent me back to England. I would have liked to have gone to Korea and fly the F-86, but I was assigned to England for 3 years to protect England, and I did a good job because nobody attacked them while I was there, and I was promoted to full colonel while I was in England.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I'm very grateful. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here, and nor would my son, for that matter. You get to fly a B-24 once, I understand.
I got into a dogfight. I had a friend that we had been stationed together in 1939 and 40 at Post Field, Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and he wound up in B-24s, and we found out that we were over there together, and he came down to visit me with his B-24 and took me up and let me fly it around. And so we went back down, and he says, I want you to check me out in the P-38. I said, okay. So I said, your next trip down, I'll check you out. And he came down, and I checked him, gave him a ground briefing, you know. He took off, and I went up in the tower, and later on, I heard him call in for landing instructions in the tower. Well, you know, in the fighter plane, we come in over and peel off and make as tight a pattern as we can. And he called in for landing instructions, and the tower gave him the runway heading and all. He says, okay, I'm on final approach. I says, Alan, where the hell are you? He said, I'm on final approach. And I looked, and out there about 3/4 of a mile out, here he came on B-24 final approach, you know. So I had to kid him about that. I said, now you're going to check me out in the B-24. Which he did. I got to take it off, got up flying around, and a B-17 decided to get frisky and made a pass at me. I said, hot dog. So I got into a dogfight with this B-17 and immediately got on his tail.
In a B-24?
He tried his best to shake me, and he couldn't. And a B-17 is a better airplane than a B-24 for dogfighting. and so he finally gave up, and I damn near rammed him because he gave up over his own base, dropped his gear, and I damn near ran into him. But then I went back and landed. Of course, before I landed, I buzzed our control tower, and then came in and landed. And the crew came up, and I was a major then. The crew came up and asked Skaggs, is Major Jeffrey going to fly us again? He says, no. They said, good, because if he wasn't, we're not going to go. I guess I really shook him up in that dogfight. But I probably shook up that B-17 crew a little more.
Art, a couple more questions I'd like to put to you. I've asked everybody this. My question is, what would you say to my 11-year-old about war who's thinking about the military as a job?
Well, I would strongly recommend it if he has an inclination to go into the military. It's great for a young man. As far as war is concerned, I'm of strong opinion that war should be conducted only as an absolute last resort. And I'm against war unless it's absolutely necessary. But I strongly recommend young men going into the military, because if they, even for maybe only 4 years, if they don't want to make a career out of it, 4 years in the military does great things. I mean, it shapes them better for what lies ahead in this old world.
I was thinking yesterday how, well, my father's passed away now, but even when he was, even 2 years ago, when he would stand up, he would still stand up and do that thing which you guys do, which is to have your back straight, your chest out, and your shoulders back. Obviously, that Sergeant Major back in 1940 must have made a hell of an impression on my dad, because 50 years later, he's still, 60 years later, he's, well, more than that, 70 years later, he's still standing up and doing that thing which, which old soldiers do. So,
Yeah.
And then...
Well, and they do it so proudly.
I'm sorry, Art. I've taken up an awful lot of your time.
Well, I'll tell you what, John, you can feel free to contact me again if you want to. I'm not really a good interview. I fumble around with my words a lot, but I blame it on the medication I'm taking. So,
Art, you've been great. You mustn't put yourself down. You've been absolutely great. There is one other thing I just thought of. I promise you this is the last thing. It's also one of my favourite questions. Now that you have the wisdom of all these years behind you, what do you think is important in life?
Important in life, I tell you, just to be happy and get along with people, getting along with others, and to make a decent living.
Even as a boy, even when I was Thomas's age, I got on really well with some of my dad's friends, most of whom were fighter pilots during the war. And I just I really like guys like you. I really enjoy talking to people like you. I think your generation is a very special one. And so this book is going to be, it started off as an idea. When my wife passed away, I thought, okay, I think that I need to photograph my father before he passes away, before it's too late. And I'm glad I did, because he's no longer with us. But then I thought, well, why don't I photograph some more old pilots? And, by the end of next month, by the end of June, we will have done 30 World War II pilots.
Oh, really?
And if I wasn't raising 2 kids on my own, I would be on a plane and I'd be sitting there in front of you. Art and Kent, thank you very, very much for speaking to me this morning.
John, feel free. You have my. I can't get away from you now if you want to get a hold of me again.
Okay. Oh, it's been really nice.
I've enjoyed talking to you too.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I enjoyed the listening.
Okay, Ken, that's a pleasure.
Thank you.
All the
Take
best.
care.
Take
Cheerio.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Yeah, what a lovely guy.
He seems a bit tough in the pictures, but once you get, just as soon as he starts talking.